Welcome to Radiant Wisdom, where every word is a gentle reminder that you are not alone in your journey. Here, we believe that every heart has a story, and every story holds the potential to illuminate the path for others. Whether you've come here seeking solace, perspective, or simply a moment of calm amidst the noise of the world, you've arrived at the right place. Today, I invite you to pause, to take a deep breath and rest in the present moment. So often, we rush through life, trying to hold everything together, carrying the weight of expectations, setbacks, and worries about the future. But here, you don't need to hold anything. Just listen. Let these words be like a river that flows over you, softening the sharp edges of doubt and fear, and reminding you of your innate strength and worth. You're here, listening, because a part of you still believes in the beauty of life, even when it feels distant or faint. And that belief, no matter how fragile it may seem, is a testament to your resilience. There is something profound in choosing to show up for yourself, even in the smallest ways, like listening to a story that gently whispers, "You're not alone." Today's reflection is about one of the most universal experiences we face as humans, the delicate balance between hope and despair. Hope is often described as a guiding light, a flame that keeps us warm in the cold. But what happens when that flame flickers or even goes out? How do we navigate the darkness without losing ourselves completely? And how do we rebuild when everything we've placed our trust in seems to crumble? In the moments of life when dreams fall apart, it's easy to feel like the ground beneath us has vanished. The world becomes a blur of questions. Why me? Why now? How did I get here? And maybe the most terrifying question of all, what if I never feel whole again? But I want to remind you of this. Despair may feel like an ending, but it is also a beginning, a profound invitation to rediscover your inner landscape, to unearth a deeper, unshakable part of yourself that no loss can ever truly take away. Together, we'll explore the journey from despair to renewal, how we can face our pain, not with bitterness or blame, but with a quiet courage that allows us to transform sorrow into wisdom. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Sometimes it's enough to simply take the next step, even if that step is just sitting in stillness and listening with an open heart. As we begin, I ask only this: be gentle with yourself. Whatever brought you here, whether it's a recent heartbreak, an unexpected failure, or a weariness that has settled deep in your bones, it's okay to feel everything that you're feeling. It's okay to grieve, to wonder, to long for clarity and comfort. Healing is not a race. It's a process of unfolding, of softening the parts of ourselves that have become hardened by fear and disappointment. Thank you for choosing to spend this time with me today. If this story speaks to you, I invite you to like the video, share it with someone who might need these words, and join our growing community by subscribing. Your story, your presence matters here. Now, let's take this journey together. One breath, one word, one moment at a time. Welcome to a space where you are seen, heard, and held in compassion. The fragile bridge between hope and despair. Hope is often described as a lifeline, a delicate yet vital thread that pulls us through the stormiest seas of life. It is that quiet whisper within that says, "Hold on just a little longer." But what many people don't realize is just how fragile hope can be. When we tie our entire sense of well-being, purpose, or happiness to a single outcome, be it a relationship, a career milestone, or a lifelong dream, hope can begin to feel more like a gamble than a guiding light. And when that gamble doesn't pay off, when the dream shatters or slips through our fingers, despair rushes in to take its place. This fragile transition from hope to despair is one of the most universal yet deeply personal human experiences. It's a quiet, invisible unraveling, one that often happens before we're even aware of it. One day we're filled with belief in a brighter tomorrow, and the next, we find ourselves staring at the pieces of what could have been, wondering how everything fell apart so quickly. Why does this happen? Why does something as beautiful and life-giving as hope have the potential to lead us into the depths of sorrow? The answer lies in how we choose to hope. You see, hope in its purest form is expansive. It's like the sky, boundless and open, able to hold a multitude of possibilities. But sometimes, without realizing it, we turn our hope into something narrow and rigid. Instead of being open to the many ways life can unfold, we pour all our energy into one specific version of happiness, one specific outcome that we believe will make us whole. In doing so, we place an unbearable amount of pressure on that singular outcome. We say to ourselves, if this doesn't work out, I don't know who I'll be. And when that outcome doesn't materialize, it feels as though the very ground beneath us has crumbled. The loss isn't just about the dream. We also lose the identity that was tied to that dream. Who are we without the career we've built our lives around? Who are we without the person we believed would love us forever? Who are we when the next chapter we envision for ourselves never begins? It's this loss of identity that often makes the bridge between hope and despair feel like a freefall. It's not simply that we're disappointed, it's that we don't know where to place our feet anymore. The familiar landmarks of our inner world, the plans, the expectations, the sense of certainty are gone, and we're left feeling untethered, as though we're floating in an endless void with nothing solid to grasp. But here's the thing, the bridge between hope and despair isn't a one-way street. We can lose our way, yes, but we can also find it again. The key is understanding that despair is not an absence of hope, but rather a distortion of it. Despair arises when we believe that hope was only ever tied to that one thing we've lost, rather than seeing hope as something much deeper, something woven into the very fabric of life itself. To rebuild our connection to hope, we must begin by softening the narrative we've been telling ourselves. Instead of viewing the loss as a permanent failure or a cruel twist of fate, we can choose to see it as part of a larger unfolding. One that we may not fully understand in the moment, but that has the potential to bring us closer to our truest selves. This doesn't mean bypassing the pain or pretending that everything is fine. On the contrary, it means acknowledging our heartbreak, our grief, and our confusion with honesty and compassion. It means sitting with our disappointment without rushing to fix it or make it go away. When we give ourselves permission to grieve fully, we begin to release the tight grip we have on what should have been, making room for what could still be. One of the greatest lessons we can learn in these moments is that life is not a single predetermined path. It's a series of crossroads, detours, and unexpected turns. Losing one path doesn't mean the end of our journey. It simply means it's time to take a different road. The essence of hope isn't in guaranteeing a specific outcome. It's in trusting our ability to navigate whatever comes, knowing that who we are is not defined by any single event or circumstance. The philosopher and poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror, just keep going. No feeling is final." These words remind us that despair, no matter how overwhelming, is never a permanent state. It is part of the ebb and flow of being human, and like all waves, it will eventually recede. When we remember this, the bridge between hope and despair becomes less fragile. It becomes a place where we can rest for a moment, gather our strength, and begin to rebuild. Not with the brittle hope that depends on external circumstances, but with a resilient hope that comes from within. A hope that says, even if things don't turn out the way I wanted, I will still find a way to grow, to heal, and to live fully. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of that bridge today, unsure of how to take the next step, know this: you are not lost. You are simply in between chapters. And the next chapter, though perhaps different from what you imagined, has the potential to be just as meaningful, just as beautiful. Sometimes, the story we didn't plan for becomes the one that teaches us who we truly are. The identity crisis of the self. When life as we know it falls apart, The impact reaches far beyond the external loss of a relationship, a career, or a dream. It shakes the very foundation of who we believe we are. We often don't realize how much of our identity is intertwined with the roles we play, the successes we achieve, or the people we love. But when those things are taken away, we're left standing in a bewildering silence, asking the most frightening question of all: who am I now? The truth is, the sense of self we carry is often a fragile construct, built from the stories we've told ourselves over time. I am a parent. I am a partner. I am a successful professional. I am someone who always achieves their goals. These labels give us a sense of purpose, grounding, and meaning. But when life disrupts the narrative, when the relationship ends, when the career crumbles, or when we don't live up to the expectations we had for ourselves, our carefully crafted sense of self can unravel. This unraveling creates what many call an identity crisis, though it often feels more like an identity void. We become untethered from our former self, like a tree whose roots have been pulled from the soil. We might look intact on the outside, but internally we are disconnected and unsure of where we belong. This sense of disorientation can lead to feelings of deep isolation, as though we've lost not only our place in the world, but also the very map that guided us. However, as terrifying as this identity void may feel, it holds within it a profound opportunity for transformation. When our old identities fall away, we're given the chance to look beneath the surface of our former roles and ask ourselves deeper questions. Was I truly defined by that title or that relationship? Am I still worthy and whole, even if I no longer fit the image I once had of myself? It's here, in the space of uncertainty, that true self-awareness begins to take root. Often, the identities we cling to are shaped more by societal expectations or past conditioning than by our authentic essence. We strive to meet the world's image of success or perfection, carrying the weight of these expectations like invisible armor. And while that armor may protect us from vulnerability, it also prevents us from fully embracing who we are beneath the surface: our strengths, our flaws, our quiet dreams, and our untapped potential. But when life strips away that armor, we're invited to stand exposed, raw, and real. At first, this exposure can feel unbearable. We feel less than, as though we're incomplete without the things that once defined us. We compare ourselves to others who seem to have their lives intact and wonder if we've failed in some irreversible way. But this comparison only deepens our suffering, as we forget one essential truth: who we are is not defined by what we've lost, but by how we choose to rise from the ashes of that loss. Think of a seed buried in the dark soil. From the outside, it looks small and insignificant, with no signs of life. But within that dark, quiet space, something miraculous is happening. The seed begins to shed its outer shell, the very shell that once defined its shape, and slowly its roots start to spread. The seed isn't dying, it's transforming into something greater. In the same way, when our old identities fall away, it can feel like an ending, but it's often the beginning of something new and stronger, a deeper connection to our true selves. So how do we navigate this identity crisis without being swallowed by it? How do we rebuild a sense of self when the old version of us feels like a distant memory? The first step is to allow ourselves to grieve. Not just for the external loss, but for the version of ourselves we thought we would always be. Grieving doesn't make us weak. It makes us honest. It acknowledges that there was love, effort, and hope tied to that identity. But just as importantly, grieving helps us release the need to cling to a past that no longer serves us. The second step is to gently reintroduce ourselves to who we are outside of the labels and expectations. This can be as simple as noticing the small things that bring us joy, comfort, or peace: a morning walk, a quiet moment of reflection, or the way we feel when we accomplish something meaningful, no matter how small. These moments remind us that we are still here, still capable of feeling, growing, and becoming. Finally, we must remember that identity is not a fixed, unchangeable thing. It is fluid and evolving. Just as seasons change, so too do we. Who you were 5 years ago is not who you are today, and who you will become tomorrow may surprise you. The version of yourself that you are grieving now may one day be a distant memory, replaced by someone who is wiser, kinder, and more resilient because of what you've endured. In Buddhism, there is a beautiful concept known as non-self, anatta. The idea that our true nature is not confined to any particular role, possession, or story. Rather than being a single, unchanging identity, we are an ever-unfolding process, shaped by each breath, each experience, and each choice. When we stop clinging to rigid definitions of who we are supposed to be, we free ourselves to simply be. So if you find yourself feeling lost or incomplete right now, know this: you are not broken. You are becoming. You are not defined by the things or people you've lost. You are defined by your capacity to rebuild, to reimagine, and to rediscover the truth of who you are. And that truth is vast, beautiful, and far stronger than you may realize. In the space where the old identity fades, something incredible can emerge. Not a perfect version of you, but an authentic one. And in the end, isn't that the truest form of freedom? The illusion of isolation. One of the most insidious effects of despair is the overwhelming feeling of isolation, the belief that we are utterly alone in our suffering. In moments of deep pain, it can feel as though the world has moved on without us, leaving us behind in the shadows. We convince ourselves that no one could possibly understand the depths of our grief or the magnitude of our loss. But this sense of isolation is, at its core, an illusion, a trick played by the mind when it's consumed by sorrow. When life doesn't unfold the way we hoped, our natural instinct is to retreat inward. We withdraw from friends, family, and even from ourselves. We stop answering calls, avoid gatherings, and turn away from the simple joys that once connected us to the world. This withdrawal often stems from the belief that sharing our pain will only burden others, or worse, make us seem weak. We convince ourselves that others don't want to hear about our struggles, or that they'll judge us for not being strong enough. But the truth is this: isolation amplifies suffering. When we cut ourselves off from connection, we unintentionally deepen our wounds. In the silence of our solitude, our inner critic becomes louder, feeding us stories of inadequacy, failure, and abandonment. The longer we sit alone with these stories, the more we begin to believe them. We begin to see our pain as proof that we're unworthy of love, support, or understanding. However, there's an important truth we must remember. Connection is always available, even in the moments when we feel most unworthy. The people who care about us may not always know how to reach us in our moments of darkness, but that doesn't mean they've stopped caring. And more importantly, the universe itself holds us in a quiet embrace, even when we feel unseen. The sky continues to stretch overhead, vast and steady. The earth remains beneath our feet, supporting us with every step. The simple act of breathing, inhale, exhale, is a reminder that life flows through us, even when we feel disconnected from it. One of the greatest misconceptions we carry is the belief that our suffering is unique to us. While our individual circumstances are different, the experience of pain, loss, and longing is universal. Look around and you'll see it in the eyes of strangers, in the lyrics of songs, in the pages of books, and in the quiet confessions of those who dare to open their hearts. We are not the only ones navigating life's storms, far from it. The human experience is one of shared vulnerability. But how do we begin to break free from the illusion of isolation when it feels so real? How do we rebuild the bridge to connection when we've been standing alone for so long? The first step is to recognize that reaching out isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of courage. When we allow ourselves to be seen in our brokenness, we invite true connection into our lives. Vulnerability is the birthplace of empathy. By sharing our pain, we give others permission to show up authentically as well. We remind ourselves and those around us that none of us are meant to carry life's burdens alone. Connection doesn't always have to come in the form of grand gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as sending a message to a friend, stepping outside for a walk where we can feel the hum of life around us, or sitting in the presence of someone who listens without judgment. Small moments of connection can create ripples that gradually dissolve the walls we've built around ourselves. Another way to dissolve the illusion of isolation is to engage in acts of compassion, not only toward others but also toward ourselves. When we are gentle with our pain, we create space for healing. Self-compassion doesn't mean we dismiss our struggles or pretend everything is fine. Instead, it means we meet our pain with kindness rather than harshness. It's saying to ourselves, "This is hard, and it's okay to feel this way. I deserve the same understanding I would offer to someone I love." At the same time, showing compassion to others can also remind us of the interconnected nature of our lives. When we offer a kind word, a helping hand, or a moment of attention to someone else, we step outside the confines of our own pain and tap into the greater web of humanity. In helping others, we often help ourselves, not by diminishing our pain, but by reminding ourselves that even in our brokenness, we have something meaningful to offer. In Buddhism, there's a concept known as interbeing, the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected. Our existence is not separate from the existence of others. Just as a single wave is part of the vast ocean, our individual experience is part of a larger collective. When we remember this, we can begin to soften the belief that we are alone in our suffering. If you're feeling isolated right now, know that the walls surrounding you are not as solid as they seem. They were built out of fear and self-protection, but they can be dismantled with compassion, connection, and time. You don't have to force yourself to move on or get over it. Healing is not a race. Instead, take small, gentle steps toward the world. Let yourself be reminded that even in your pain, you are worthy of love and belonging. Sometimes, the very act of breathing is a form of connection. With each breath, you are participating in the cycle of life, sharing the same air as every living being around you. This reminder can be enough to crack open the illusion of isolation and let a little light in. You are not alone. Even in moments of solitude, you are held by the unseen connections that bind us all. And as you continue your journey, know that there are hands, visible and invisible, ready to reach out and remind you that you are seen, you are valued, and you are loved. Releasing the desire to control outcomes. One of the most difficult lessons life teaches us is that we cannot control everything. Yet, for many of us, the desire to control outcomes is almost instinctual. We plan, prepare, and pour ourselves into shaping the future, clinging tightly to the belief that if we just try hard enough, we can guarantee a particular result. Whether it's success in our careers, stability in our relationships, or the fulfillment of our dreams. But what happens when life doesn't comply with our plans? When the promotion doesn't come, the relationship falls apart, or the dream slips away despite all of our efforts? For most of us, it feels like failure, not just of our plans, but of ourselves. And beneath that perceived failure is a painful truth. Our desire to control outcomes wasn't just about achieving something external. It was about maintaining a sense of security, certainty, and self-worth. The irony is that the more we try to control life, the more out of control we often feel. Life is unpredictable by its very nature. No amount of planning or striving can protect us from change, loss, or uncertainty. Yet, in our attempts to control, we resist the very flow of life itself, clinging to a narrow version of what should happen instead of opening ourselves to what could happen. This resistance creates tension, frustration, and suffering. The path to peace begins when we release our grip, when we learn to trust the process rather than micromanage every outcome. This doesn't mean we stop caring or become passive in our lives. Instead, it means we shift our focus from controlling the future to fully engaging with the present. But how do we let go when our hearts are so deeply invested in a particular result? How do we release control when uncertainty feels so terrifying? The first step is to recognize why we cling so tightly to outcomes. Often it's because we associate our identity with achieving a specific goal or maintaining a particular image. We tell ourselves, if I don't achieve this, I'm not good enough, or if this relationship doesn't last, I've failed. In this way, our desire to control outcomes becomes tangled with our self-worth. But our worth is not determined by what we can or cannot control. It is not diminished by setbacks, disappointments, or failures. Who we are at our core, our intrinsic value remains whole and untouchable, no matter the circumstances. When we internalize this truth, the need to control begins to loosen its hold on us. The second step is to cultivate acceptance, not as a form of resignation, but as an act of courage. Acceptance means acknowledging reality as it is, rather than fighting against it. This doesn't mean we have to like what's happening or give up on our dreams. It simply means that we make peace with the present moment, understanding that resisting what already is only deepens our suffering. One way to practice acceptance is to remind ourselves that outcomes are shaped by countless factors beyond our control. Timing, external circumstances, and the choices of others, to name a few. When we let go of the belief that everything rests solely on our shoulders, we create space for grace and humility. We begin to see that life isn't something to be conquered, it's something to be lived, one moment at a time. The third step is to shift our focus from the outcome to the process. Instead of obsessing over whether we'll get the job, mend the relationship, or reach the finish line, we can choose to pour our energy into showing up fully in the present. We can ask ourselves, am I acting with integrity? Am I aligned with my values? Am I putting my heart into what I can control, my effort, my attitude, my intentions? When we focus on the process rather than the result, we reclaim our power. We're no longer held hostage by outcomes that may or may not come to pass. Instead, we take ownership of the choices we make in each moment, trusting that, regardless of the outcome, we've done our part. In Buddhist teachings, there is a concept known as non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean indifference or apathy. It means engaging with life fully, while releasing our fixation on specific results. It's the understanding that while we can plant the seeds and nurture the soil, we cannot force the flower to bloom on our timeline. The flower will bloom when the conditions are right, and not a moment sooner. Releasing control is ultimately an act of faith. Not blind faith in a specific outcome, but faith in our own resilience and the unfolding of life's journey. It's trusting that even if things don't turn out the way we hoped, we have the strength to navigate what comes next. It's believing that life is working with us, not against us, even when it feels otherwise. When we release the desire to control outcomes, we free ourselves from the burden of perfectionism and the fear of failure. We begin to see setbacks not as punishments, but as opportunities for growth and redirection. We cultivate patience and learn to appreciate the beauty of the unfolding, even when the path is unclear. So if you're holding on tightly to a specific outcome right now, take a deep breath. Gently ask yourself, what am I truly afraid of losing? And is that fear rooted in reality or in a story I've been telling myself? Remind yourself that you are not defined by any single moment of success or failure. You are defined by your capacity to adapt, to learn, and to move forward with grace. In the end, the greatest freedom comes not from controlling every twist and turn of life, but from trusting ourselves to rise no matter where life leads us. Surrendering control is not the same as giving up. It is, in fact, the ultimate act of self-trust. It's saying, I don't need to know the outcome in order to know that I will be okay. As you continue your journey, remember this. Life will unfold in ways you cannot predict. Some chapters will surprise you with joy, while others may challenge you with sorrow. But through it all, you will remain whole, resilient, and capable of creating meaning no matter what comes your way. Letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of hope. It means letting go of fear and opening your heart to all the possibilities that life has yet to reveal. The strength within surrender. Surrender is a word that often carries negative connotations in our culture. To surrender is frequently seen as a form of weakness or defeat, an act of giving up when the odds feel stacked against us. But in truth, surrender, when understood correctly, is not about failure or resignation. It is about strength. It is about choosing peace over resistance and learning to flow with life rather than endlessly fighting against it. There is an incredible strength in saying, "I release what I cannot control." This isn't an act of helplessness, it's an act of profound courage and trust. Surrender requires us to set aside our ego, the part of us that demands certainty, control, and recognition, and to step into a space of humility and openness. It invites us to stop clinging to how we think things should be, and instead embrace life as it is. But let's be clear, surrender doesn't mean we stop caring, dreaming, or taking action. It doesn't mean we become passive bystanders in our own lives. True surrender means showing up fully, doing our best, and then releasing our attachment to the outcome. It means trusting that even if life unfolds differently than we hoped, it can still lead us to something meaningful and beautiful. So, what does it take to find strength within surrender? 1. Embracing uncertainty. One of the hardest things for the human mind to accept is uncertainty. We crave answers, plans, and assurances that everything will turn out the way we want. But life, in its essence, is unpredictable. Surrender means acknowledging that we cannot foresee or control every twist and turn. Rather than being paralyzed by the unknown, we can choose to embrace it as a space of possibility. When we let go of the need for certainty, we open ourselves up to experiences and opportunities that we never could have imagined. Think of a river flowing downstream. When we surrender to the current, we move with the natural flow of life. But when we resist, when we try to swim against it, we exhaust ourselves and make the journey infinitely harder. True strength lies in trusting the river, even when we don't know exactly where it will lead. 2. Letting go of perfectionism. Another obstacle to surrender is the belief that we must get everything right. Perfectionism tells us that we can't rest until every detail aligns perfectly with our vision. But life rarely, if ever, unfolds in perfect alignment with our expectations. When we cling to the need for everything to be flawless, we set ourselves up for constant disappointment. Surrendering means giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to evolve. It means understanding that our worth is not tied to external achievements or how perfectly we handle every situation. Strength is found in recognizing that our humanity, our capacity to grow, adapt, and learn, is far more valuable than any illusion of perfection. 3. Trusting the process. Surrender also requires us to trust the process, even when the path forward feels unclear or painful. Often we only see a small piece of the bigger picture. In moments of struggle or loss, it's easy to believe that things will never improve. But surrender asks us to remember that life is constantly changing, and nothing is permanent. Not our pain, not our fears, and not our setbacks. When we surrender to the flow of life, we remind ourselves that healing and growth take time. Like a tree that stands through every storm and season, our strength lies not in avoiding hardship, but in trusting that we can endure and bloom again, even after loss. 4. Releasing the need for approval. Many of us struggle to surrender because we are afraid of what others will think. We fear being judged as weak, irresponsible, or foolish if we let go of control. But true strength within surrender means stepping away from the need for external validation. It's about living authentically, even if others don't understand our choices. When we stop seeking approval, we reclaim our power. We no longer live according to others' expectations, but instead listen to the quiet wisdom within ourselves. We learn to trust that our value is not defined by how others perceive us, but by how aligned we are with our truth. 5. Practicing self-compassion. Surrender requires us to be gentle with ourselves. When we hold ourselves to impossible standards or berate ourselves for not having all the answers, we make surrender feel impossible. But when we practice self-compassion, we create space for grace. We remind ourselves that it's okay to feel tired, scared, or uncertain. It's okay to need rest and to ask for help. Self-compassion allows us to surrender with kindness rather than shame. Instead of seeing surrender as giving up, we see it as an act of deep self-respect, a way of honoring our own limits and recognizing when it's time to release the weight we've been carrying. 6. Finding peace in the present moment. The practice of surrender brings us back to the present moment, the only place where true peace exists. When we surrender, we stop replaying the past or anxiously trying to predict the future. Instead, we root ourselves in the here and now. We notice the simple things, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the sound of the breeze, the quiet rhythm of our breath. By grounding ourselves in the present, we begin to realize that life is not something to be conquered or controlled. It's something to be experienced, moment by moment. Each breath becomes a reminder that we are alive, that we are enough, and that life, with all its unpredictability, is still unfolding in ways that we may not yet understand. The paradox of surrender. There is a profound paradox at the heart of surrender. When we let go, we don't lose, we gain. We gain freedom from fear, from self-doubt, and from the endless need to prove ourselves. We gain the clarity and strength that come from accepting life as it is, rather than fighting to make it something it's not. So, if you find yourself holding tightly to something you cannot control, a dream, a relationship, or an outcome, ask yourself this: what would happen if I let go? Who might I become if I stopped trying to force life into a shape it was never meant to take? In the act of surrender, we don't give up, we rise. We rise into a deeper understanding of our strength, our resilience, and our ability to create meaning even in the midst of uncertainty. When we surrender, we make room for grace, for healing, and for the quiet unfolding of a life that is far greater than anything we could have scripted on our own. Surrender in the end is not the absence of strength, it is the discovery of it. The gift of renewal. After we've walked through despair, navigated uncertainty, and released our need for control, something profound begins to happen. A quiet but powerful transformation takes root. Renewal is not simply about getting back to normal or returning to who we once were. Renewal is the process of becoming someone new, someone wiser, stronger, and more compassionate because of what we've endured. In our moments of struggle, it's easy to believe that the best parts of our lives are behind us, that the pain we've experienced has somehow diminished us. But life is cyclical. Just as the seasons change, so do we. Winter may feel endless, but spring always follows. Renewal reminds us that our darkest moments do not define us. They prepare us for rebirth. Like a forest regrowing after a fire, or a river carving a new path after a storm, we have the power to rebuild. Not as we were, but as something even more resilient and beautiful. But what does renewal really mean? How do we recognize the quiet miracle of our own growth when we're still tender from what we've lost? Renewal isn't a single moment of change. It's a gradual process, unfolding in ways that may be subtle but deeply profound. Let's explore what the gift of renewal looks like and how we can invite it into our lives. 1. Renewal begins with self-awareness. Renewal starts when we stop resisting the truth of where we are and embrace our experience fully. We often think of renewal as a fresh start, But true renewal requires an honest reckoning with everything we've been through. It means taking time to reflect on what we've learned from our pain, about our strength, our values, and our needs. Self-awareness allows us to carry forward the lessons of our experiences without carrying the weight of bitterness or regret. It's about asking ourselves, what has this experience taught me about who I am and what I want moving forward? Renewal isn't about pretending that the past didn't happen. It's about integrating what we've learned into a new way of living. 2. Letting go to make room for growth. Renewal cannot happen unless we create space for it. This often means letting go not just of old dreams or expectations, but of old versions of ourselves. We may cling to past identities because they feel familiar or safe, even when they no longer fit who we've become. But growth requires us to release what no longer serves us. Just as a garden must be pruned to make room for new blooms, we too must clear away the parts of our lives that no longer align with our truth. This can be a painful process, letting go of habits, relationships, or plans we once cherished. But in that letting go, we make space for something new to grow. Renewal reminds us that we don't have to carry everything forward. We can choose what to nurture and what to release. 3. Trusting in small beginnings. Renewal doesn't always look grand or dramatic. More often, it arrives quietly, in small, steady moments of healing. It's the way we notice ourselves smiling again after a long period of sadness, or the first time we feel excitement about something new. These small moments are like seeds, fragile at first, but capable of growing into something extraordinary if we nurture them. Often, we overlook these moments because we expect renewal to feel like an immediate breakthrough. But true renewal is slow and deliberate. It's in the small choices we make each day to show up for life, to take one more step, try one more time, or open our hearts just a little more. Renewal invites us to celebrate progress, no matter how small. 4. Strength through vulnerability. One of the greatest gifts of renewal is the realization that our strength doesn't come from never being broken. It comes from our ability to rebuild after being broken. Renewal teaches us that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a pathway to deeper resilience. When we embrace our vulnerability, we allow ourselves to be honest about what we need, what we've endured, and where we're headed. This honesty helps us rebuild from a place of authenticity rather than trying to hold it all together or pretend we're unaffected by our experiences. Renewal invites us to live with greater openness, knowing that our worth isn't tied to perfection, but to our willingness to heal and grow. 5. Embracing life's impermanence. Renewal also asks us to embrace the truth of impermanence. Just as pain is temporary, so too is joy. But this impermanence isn't something to fear. It's what makes life precious. When we accept that nothing lasts forever, we stop holding on so tightly to fleeting moments, and instead we learn to savor them. Renewal is not about chasing a permanent state of happiness, but about finding beauty in the ebb and flow of life's changes. When we understand that renewal will happen again and again throughout our lives, we stop seeing setbacks as endings. Instead, we recognize them as opportunities for transformation. We realize that the seasons of our lives are not something we control, but something we can move through with grace. 6. Gratitude for the journey. The final gift of renewal is gratitude. Not just for the good times, but for the entire journey. Renewal allows us to look back on our pain, not with resentment, but with a quiet reverence for what it taught us. It's the ability to say, I wouldn't have chosen that hardship, but I am grateful for how it shaped me. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending that the difficult moments weren't painful. It means acknowledging that even in our struggles there were lessons, growth, and moments of grace. Renewal helps us recognize that we are stronger, kinder, and more compassionate because of what we've endured. A new chapter. As you reflect on your own journey, remember that renewal isn't a destination, it's an unfolding. You don't need to have everything figured out to begin again. You don't need to rush the process or force yourself to move on before you're ready. Renewal is patient and steady, like the first light of dawn after a long night. Trust that within you is the capacity to rebuild, to grow, and to bloom in ways you never expected. Renewal is not about erasing the past. It's about stepping forward with all that you've learned, ready to embrace whatever comes next. No matter how many times life asks you to start over, remember this: you are not starting from scratch. You are starting from experience, from wisdom, and from a deeper understanding of your own strength. Renewal is not just a return, it is a rebirth. And from that rebirth, a new version of you, resilient, compassionate, and alive, will emerge, ready to live fully and love deeply once again. The lesson: turning rubbish into roses. In life, we often see pain, mistakes, and failures as waste, as experiences we wish we could erase, moments we regret, or memories we push to the farthest corners of our minds. But what if, instead of viewing these difficult parts of our journey as rubbish, we saw them as the very compost that enriches the soil of our growth? Just as decaying leaves and broken branches nourish a garden, the most painful parts of our lives have the potential to nurture our resilience, compassion, and wisdom. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. Turning rubbish into roses is an intentional process, one that requires patience, reflection, and faith in our ability to grow. It asks us to do something radical, to stop running from our pain and instead to sit with it, to listen to what it has to teach us. The poet Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Our wounds, though painful, can become entry points for clarity, healing, and strength. But how do we turn our struggles into something meaningful? How do we take the bitterness of disappointment and cultivate something beautiful in its place? 1. Acknowledging the rubbish. The first step is acknowledging the rubbish in our lives, whether it's failure, heartbreak, or loss, without judgment or shame. Too often we waste energy pretending that everything is fine or blaming ourselves for the pain we've experienced. But transformation begins with honesty. It's about saying, yes, this hurt me. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I'm carrying pain. Acknowledgement is not the same as defeat. In fact, it's a courageous act of self-compassion. When we stop resisting our pain, we begin to create space for healing. We start to see that the rubbish we carry doesn't define us. It's simply part of the human experience. 2. Finding the lessons beneath the pain. Every painful experience holds a lesson, though it may not be immediately visible. Some lessons teach us resilience, showing us that we're stronger than we ever believed. Others teach us humility, reminding us that it's okay to be vulnerable and to ask for help. Still, others deepen our empathy, helping us understand and connect with others who are also suffering. To turn rubbish into roses, we must ask ourselves, what is this experience teaching me? How can I grow because of it? These questions don't diminish the reality of our pain. They help us give our pain a purpose. 3. Releasing the past and nurturing the present. Once we've acknowledged our pain and learned from it, we must release the grip it has on us. This doesn't mean we forget what happened or pretend it didn't matter. It means we stop carrying it as a burden. Just as a gardener clears away weeds to make room for new growth, we must create space in our hearts and minds for renewal. One of the simplest ways to nurture the present is through gratitude, not necessarily for the pain itself, but for the growth it inspired. When we shift our focus from what we've lost to what we've gained, strength, resilience, clarity, we begin to see that even the most difficult chapters of our lives contributed to who we are becoming. 4. Trusting in the power of time. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. Roses don't bloom the day after they're planted. In the same way, healing and renewal take time. We must trust that, with patience and care, the seeds we've planted will grow. There will be setbacks and moments when we feel like nothing is changing, but growth is happening even when we can't see it. Just as compost slowly enriches the soil, the challenges we face enrich our inner lives in ways that may only become clear with time. 5. Sharing the roses with others. One of the most beautiful parts of turning rubbish into roses is that our transformation doesn't just impact us, it can also inspire and heal others. When we share our stories of growth and renewal, we remind others that they too can rise from their struggles. Our experiences become like the fragrance of a rose, spreading beauty, comfort, and hope to those around us. By offering our compassion, understanding, and kindness, we become a living example of what it means to turn pain into purpose. We remind others that their wounds are not permanent marks of failure, but seeds of strength waiting to bloom. The final lesson. Life will continue to hand us moments of joy and sorrow, growth and loss. But when we embrace the process of turning rubbish into roses, we realize that nothing is truly wasted. Every setback, every mistake, and every heartbreak holds within it the potential for something beautiful. The roses in our lives are not a result of avoiding pain, but of meeting it with courage, compassion, and hope. We can choose to see our hardships not as signs of defeat, but as the fertile ground from which new dreams and new strengths will bloom. So, when life feels overwhelming, remember this: you are a gardener of your own soul. Even the hardest experiences can be transformed into something meaningful. With time, patience, and love, the rubbish of today can become the roses of tomorrow. So, dear listener, as you move forward, remember this: life's impermanence means that no sorrow is eternal, just as no joy is permanent. Trust in your capacity to heal and renew. You are not the person who was defeated yesterday. You are the one rising today. Thank you for sharing this time with us. If today's story touched your heart, let us know by leaving a comment, sharing your own journey, and subscribing for more soulful reflections. May peace, resilience, and renewal find their way into your days ahead. Until next time, stay radiant.